This week on Vaticano, about 1,000 prisoners from 12 countries around the world gather with Pope Francis for Sunday Mass at the Vatican. The event is part of the Jubilee for Prisoners, celebrated as part of the Holy Year of Mercy. We discover how the Church can defend values in a digital world, and we meet with the ecumenical members of the Springtime of Faith Foundation. Learn with us the exact day the Vatican Museums were founded and witness the beauty of one of the most famous ancient sculptures. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. The Jubilee of Prisoners took place on the 5th and 6th of November in Rome. During this two-day celebration, some prisoners and their families, penitentiary employees, prison chaplains, and various associations took part in different activities. The most important event was Sunday Mass, celebrated by the Holy Father, Pope Francis.
Il messaggio che la parola di Dio oggi vuole.
The message that God's Word wants to bring us today is surely that of hope, the hope that does not disappoint.
È la speranza che non delude.
About 1,000 prisoners from 12 countries around the world attended the Mass. The majority of the prisoners were from Italy. About 50 prisoners and ex-prisoners were also present from the United States, including a group of 22 from Cincinnati.
La speranza è dono di Dio.
Hope is a gift of God. We must ask for it. It is placed deep within each human heart in order to shed light on this life, so often troubled and clouded by so many situations that bring sadness and pain. We need to nourish the roots of our hope so that they can bear fruit, primarily the certainty of God's closeness and compassion, despite whatever evil we have done. There is no corner of our heart that cannot be touched by God's love. Whenever someone makes a mistake, the Father's mercy is all the more present, awakening repentance, forgiveness, reconciliation, and peace.
Perdono, riconciliazione, pace.
Among the participants were all types of inmates, including minors, people under house arrest, others with various sentences, and even individual cases on death row.
Certo, il mancato rispetto della legge ha meritato la condanna e la privazione.
Certainly, breaking the law involves paying the price, and losing one's freedom is the worst part of serving time because it affects us so deeply. All the same, hope must not falter. Paying for the wrong we have done is one thing, but another thing entirely is the breath of hope, which cannot be stifled by anyone or anything.
Male compiuto. Altra cosa invece è il respiro della speranza.
The prisoners were involved in the service of different parts of the Holy Mass. The communion hosts used during Holy Communion were made by prisoners of the Opera Maximum Security Prison in Milan.
Cari detenuti, è il giorno del vostro giubileo.
Dear friends, today is your Jubilee. Today in God's sight, may your hope be kindled anew. A Jubilee, by its very nature, always brings with it a proclamation of freedom. It does not depend on me to grant this, but the Church's duty, one she cannot renounce, is to awaken within you the desire for true freedom.
Non dipende da me poterla concedere.
After the Mass, during the Angelus prayer, Pope Francis appealed to the civil authorities of each country to make an act of mercy towards those prisoners who would be considered eligible to benefit from this measure.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, vorrei rivolgere un appello.
I would like to make an appeal in favor of bettering the conditions of life in prisons throughout the whole world.
In tutto il mondo. Affinché sia rispettata pienamente la dignità umana dei detenuti.
fully respecting the human dignity of the detainees. Furthermore, I desire to reaffirm the importance of reflecting on the necessity of penal justice that is not exclusively punitive, but open to the hope and the perspective of reinserting the accused into society.
Ma aperta alla speranza e alla prospettiva di reinserire il reo nella società. Hermanas y hermanos, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters.
On the evening of Saturday, November the 5th, Pope Francis welcomed the Third World Meeting of Popular Movements at the Paul VI Hall in the Vatican.
En este nuestro tercer encuentro,
In our third meeting, we expressed the same thirst, the thirst for justice, the same outcry, earth, home, and work for all.
tierra, techo y trabajo para todos.
The meeting was attended by different organizations of people from the margins of society. The delegates came from more than 60 countries, representing 6 continents. The aim of the Third World Meeting of Popular Movements was to discuss how to defend the rights of the poor, the unemployed, and of those who have lost their agricultural land. The Holy Father emphasized the good work of the popular movements and thanked them for giving dignity to the worker and for reducing unemployment.
Ustedes, las organizaciones de los excluidos,
You, organizations of the excluded, and the organizations from other sectors of society, you are called to revitalize and reestablish democracies going through a real crisis. Do not fall into the temptation of being put into a box that reduces you to secondary actors, or worse, to mere administrators of the existing misery.
a meros administraciones de la miseria existente.
On the morning of November the 3rd, Pope Francis received 200 members of various religions in the Clementine Hall at the Vatican. The leaders of these different denominations are engaged in the sphere of works of charity and mercy. The Holy Father explained to the participants that during this Jubilee year, the Catholic Church has placed at the heart of the Christian message the theme of mercy. He said that mercy lies at the very foundation of the Church's life, and it is the key to understanding the mystery of man and of this humanity which needs forgiveness and peace.
Questa via sia la nostra via maestra.
May this be the path we take. May we reject the aimless paths of disagreement and closed-mindedness. May it never again happen that religions, because of the conduct of some of their followers, convey a distorted message, out of tune with that of mercy.
I loro seguaci trasmettano un messaggio stonato.
Pope Francis condemned the violent attitudes that profane the name of God and invited all religions to build together the peaceful encounter of believers and genuine religious freedom. For November, Pope Francis focuses on migrants and refugees in his monthly prayer video.
¿Puede un país afrontar por sí solo las dificultades que produce la emigración forzada? Debemos pasar de la indiferencia y del miedo a la aceptación del otro. Porque ese otro podría ser tú o yo. Súmate conmigo en esta petición. Que los países que acogen a gran número de refugiados y desplazados sean apoyados en su esfuerzo de solidaridad.
In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano. More on Vaticano begins now.
On October 31st, here at the Notre Dame Basilica in Geneva, people prayed in communion with the Pope for peace in the Middle East and especially for Syria. This event coincided with the Pope's participation in the ecumenical commemoration held that same day in Sweden. The prayer mass in Geneva was led by the Apostolic Nuncio to the UN Geneva, who admonished in his homily that violence only generates violence.
La violence génère la violence.
We represent 30 Catholic-inspired NGOs involved on the diplomatic level at the UN Geneva. Our members honored tonight the population of martyrs and prayed to the Eternal for an end to this barbarity. We need communion between Christians from here and Middle Eastern Christians who are suffering. We all belong to the same Christ, but also communion with all humans who are suffering, regardless of their religious beliefs. The devastating civil war, especially in Aleppo, shows no sign of ending. So far it claimed the lives of nearly 500,000 innocent men, women and children, and any rules of warfare seem to be absent.
Strikes against hospitals, schools, marketplaces, water facilities, and bakeries are now commonplace, and if proven to be intentional, may amount to war crimes.
Pope Francis had complained that often the same nations pledging support for peace are the ones supplying weapons for the conflict, and the United Nations condemned all parties for their refusal to protect innocent lives.
And they refuse to take responsibility for their actions, a responsibility that belongs not only to the warring parties on the ground, but also to those external actors who support them.
Adding to its distress in late October until early this month, Syria was also one of the states that were examined by the United Nations Human Rights Council's Universal Periodic Review, UPR, a unique process which involves an annual review of the human rights record of all 193 UN member states. In this exclusive EWTN interview, the Syrian ambassador explained why the UN review report contains over 200 recommendations.
And unfortunately, some of these or many of these repeated recommendations were in fact politicized recommendations, were in fact accusations rather than constructive recommendations. So we are open to look into all the recommendations which were made in a manner that respects the spirit of this review.
Regarding the current crisis in his country, the ambassador confirmed that his government is committed to reach a political solution.
The government is committed to reaching a political resolution of the crisis in Syria based on Syrian dialogue that can ensure a national consensus on drawing the future of Syria amongst Syrians without any external interference.
Blessed are the peacemakers, words from Jesus that the Archbishop recalled during the prayer mass for peace in Syria.
We need to go beyond human means. We need to go to the peace of Christ. And this we can achieve only through prayer at Mass. And that's why I think this Mass was absolutely necessary, should be repeated.
Peace always remains a duty for the Church. No? It is, we believe that we will live with peace, but we are disappointed so often. No? Peace is an enormous challenge, and I think we have a papacy that is so aware of this. And this, as a representative of the Holy See, it's nice to be supported in this idea. And as you know, all of you, in Geneva, we all need to be confirmed in our conviction that peace is needed and this only solution. No? Only peace has a future, anything else has no future.
On Friday, November the 4th, leaders and top-level executives from the fields of communications, technology, news, entertainment, and advertising media gathered in the Eternal City to discuss how to transmit values in the digital age. Father Philip Larry is professor of logic and epistemology at the Lateran University. He was one of the initiators of the Core Values Conference. He says that the Church must actively engage in the issues posed by values and ethics in the digital society.
The doctrine of the Church is very well known, and so in a sense, what the Church thinks about many of these issues, like transparency, like just wage, like honesty in terms of communication, is already out there. What we need to do is apply that to new digital technologies, advertising, and the media.
To respond to the challenges that the digital revolution has brought to humanity today and what the values are which must sustain us, the organizers have chosen the encyclical letter Laudato Si, written by Pope Francis. In his letter, the Holy Father invites everyone to think of and be responsible for our world, because it is our common home.
And the Pope himself is a huge media movement in and of himself. And so I think that goes a long way in terms of presenting what the Church does in the media and what the Church thinks about these issues, just the person of the Pope.
The Holy See itself welcomed 300 participants from different parts of the world and backgrounds. Monsignor Dario Eduardo Vigano, prefect of the Secretariat for Communications of the Vatican, gave an introductory speech by video message to the conference. Monsignor Lucio Adrián Ruiz, the secretary of the same Secretariat for Communications, says that the time has come for people to understand that values have to be placed again at the heart of our society.
I think the cultural process has been a common feeling that more or less is at the heart of everyone, that we need to look at values. There is a common feeling that values cannot be separated from production of technology or of networking. And this is a common feeling that is very important. It is important to take into account what we have seen, that in the presentations, someone always has a job. Someone always has an initiative regarding some kind of value. So when we came together, it was relatively easy because we all agreed in presenting the panorama. It may be that we might agree on this point or not this point, but the idea that values are central is a common theme.
The Core Values Conference is only the beginning of the important work each member of society has to think about. Father Philip Larry says that the Catholic Church should be very aware of the transformations that the digital revolution is bringing about today.
We're a little bit behind, and because I think sometimes we're too eager to provide a conventional religious structure, which is now in upheaval because of the digital revolution. And so as a church, there are many people involved in the church, just like yourself, that are active and that are addressing these issues. What I wanted to do is to bring these people to Rome, and so that they could discuss these things with people in Rome and also with the Holy Father.
The conference was prepared with the collaboration of the biggest Catholic media partners. EWTN News was one of the official digital partners for the event. How can different Christian denominations collaborate together if they don't agree on theology? What should Christians do to conserve and promote values in society? Where do Christian leaders who are open for constructive dialogue meet? The Springtime of Faith Foundation was created to give answers to these questions and to provide opportunities to gather Christian leaders from different parts of society in one place. Thomas Wykes is the leader of the foundation. He spoke with EWTN about the annual Rome Summit, which was held at the Pontifical Augustinianum University from November the 3rd to the 6th.
It's very helpful for us to get together once a year and say, how does dialogue work where you are? This afternoon we had a period of time where leaders talked about signs of spring in their geographical region. And they actually talked about where Catholics and Protestants come together to work in the pro-life movement, or Catholics and Protestants come together to serve the poor, or Catholics and Protestants have found cooperative theological discussions. Maybe they couldn't do something heavy theologically, but they could pray together for some special intention together.
The Springtime of Faith Foundation extends the opportunity to 30 to 40 international Catholic and Christian leaders to participate in its Rome Summit each year. As a result, many great initiatives are shared and many new relationships are made among the participants. We'd like to introduce you to a couple of them. Amal Maroghi is founder and executive director of Aradin Charitable Trust. This organization is working to help to preserve the cultural heritage of Christian communities and other minorities in the Middle East. Amal grew up in Iraq in an Aramaic Christian family. After moving to England for studies and work at Cambridge University, she realized that the Aramaic language and the cultural heritage of Iraq is under threat due to the difficult social and economic situation caused by conflicts.
And then I realized that actually our old churches and manuscripts and artifacts are not looked after very well. They are not archived, they are not recorded, there are no studies of them. And I decided that we have to do something about it. And that's why I started with Aradin Charitable Trust to preserve cultural heritage, but also to train people, because I think that education is the best way of preserving cultural heritage. It's not just going there and make studies about something, but it is helping local communities to preserve their cultural heritage and training them. When I started going around, especially in the villages, I realized that through looking after their culture, I'm looking after them as well.
Olivier Fleury came to the annual Roman Summit to speak about the JC 2033 project. The Jesus Celebration 2033 is an initiative to celebrate within all of Christianity the 2,000-year anniversary of the resurrection of Christ.
Imagine all nations celebrating Jesus around the world. Imagine our neighbors touched by the love of Christ. Join us for the Jesus Celebration 2033.
Cry of Jesus' heart just when he left was, be witness of what I have just done. So it is not for professional to speak about Jesus. I think it is for all Christian. If you have Christ within us, if I do have Christ within me, that needs to come out in a verbal form, in an act form. And that's why I love Pope Francis, how he emphasizes on loving the poor, loving the one who doesn't understand and doesn't know Jesus. So as Christians, we need desperately to share about the gospel, the good news of Jesus.
We see ourselves as servants of unity in a non-theological way. We like to promote friendship building amongst the body of Christ. There are great leaders with stories to tell about how they're building up the body in their part of the world, how they foster unity, how they foster mutual respect.
Just a couple of witnesses among the many people Springtime of Faith brings together every year. Thanks for watching. Stick around for more on Vaticano. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano. We're in front of the great masterpiece of Hellenistic culture, the Statue of Laocoon and his sons. It's kept now in the Pio Clementino Museum in the Vatican. This masterpiece had been buried in a hidden room for many centuries until it was unearthed in Rome in the vineyard of Felice de Fredis. The date of the finding was believed to be January the 15th, 1506. However, on Thursday, November the 4th, at a conference in the Vatican museums, a new fact regarding the finding of the Laocoon group came to light. Thanks to a small note inside the cradle book, the exact date of the finding was established as January the 10th, 1506, 5 days before what was believed to be for many centuries the exact date. What can this 5 days difference tell us? For Alfredo Serangeli, it means a lot. He was the one who found the cradle book with the information about the statue of Laocoon in the archives of his diocese.
Cambio della data è straordinario perché
the change in the date is an extraordinary fact, not only for the discovery of the Laocoon group itself, but because this date also marks the beginnings of the Vatican museums. So although it may seem of little importance, it actually changes a lot. It is like a tiny little bit in the great history of the Laocoon group, and it's happened after 500 years.
Però questa è avvenuta dopo 500 anni.
The Laocoon group represents Laocoon, a Trojan priest, and his sons being attacked by sea serpents. It was a punishment from the Greek gods because Laocoon opposed the entrance of the Trojan horse into his city. The story was recounted in ancient Greek tragedies and by Homer, Sophocles, and Virgil. Luca Calene, an art history expert, says that the statue dates to the end of the 1st century before Christ and that it was placed in the palace of Emperor Titus. The names of the 3 sculptors have also been preserved. They hailed from the Greek island of Rhodes. Their names are Agesander, Athenodorus, and Polydorus.
L'importanza di quest'opera però non è solamente
The importance of this work, however, is not only in the field of classical art, because it was kept here in the Vatican, the center of the world at that time. From a simple pagan artifact, it became an exemplum doloris. Christianity recognized in this statue not only a Trojan priest, but an image of suffering, which was later copied and adopted by all the great artists of the 16th century onwards, Michelangelo and Rubens, until Wilkesman and in Neoclassicism.
dal Cinquecento in poi, Michelangelo, Rubens.
Bishop Apicella of the Diocese of Velletri Segni, Italy, says that Christian culture is not against the ancient one, because Christianity re-evaluated the virtues and the good values that existed in paganism. His Excellency remembered that the first man to see the sculpture was Michelangelo, and the one who acquired it was Pope Julius II.
Puoi andare a vedere la Cappella Sistina.
If you go and see the Sistine Chapel, the scenes of the Old Testament and the prophets, the paintings of Michelangelo on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, if you pay attention to the movement of Christ in the fresco of the Last Judgment, you will find that in the mind and in the eyes and in the heart of Michelangelo, there remained what had been seen in the Laocoon group.
È rimasto proprio negli occhi, nella mente e nel cuore quello che ha visto nel Laocoonte.
This masterpiece is a perfect example of how Christian art has been improved by cross-pollinating with the ancient world. The Laocoon group actually paved the way for the Baroque movement.